Hello, I'm Jason Moore for AETutsPlus.com, and welcome to my VHS Rewind Still Pause Old School Video Extravaganza. Now, the best thing about this tutorial is that it doesn't require any third-party plugins. You'll be able to achieve every effect you see here using standard After Effects plugins. I feel like it's only safe to warn you that unauthorized duplication of this tutorial is a violation of state and federal law and is subject to criminal prosecution. Okay, who am I kidding? No one ever reads the FBI warning. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the effect we'll be creating. Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to focus specifically on the rewind and still pause effect. At some point I'll come back and do a tutorial on the VHS look that also uses only After Effects plugins. So let's get started. The majority of this effect is driven by displacement maps, and we need to create some distortions for our displacement maps so that our footage kind of gets bent up in various ways to create that rewind look. Alright, let's start by creating a new composition. We're going to call this composition Distortion Comp. And we're going to use the HDTV 720 2997 preset. And let's go for a length of 3 seconds. We'll click OK. Now, as we set up our distortion effects, it really helps to have something in the background to kind of see what's happening. So I'm just going to pull in my logo reveal here. You can pull in whatever footage you're going to use in your final rewind effect. And this is just going to help us to kind of see what's going on. Now, the first thing we're going to do is create kind of a frame around this. As you stop and fast forward and play video on VHS players, you'd kind of get this frame around it. And so we're going to create a new solid that is black. And we want that to be comp size. We'll click OK. And then we're just going to kind of frame this thing off. And we don't want it to be perfect. We don't want equal edges on all sides. We want it to kind of look random a little bit. So let's just kind of drag that mask out. And let's do a subtract. And we want it to be a little bit soft, so let's do 10 pixels on the feather there. And we'll close that up. Let's just rename this layer Outer Frame. Alright, so next what we want to do is start creating our distortion effects. And let's just look at the sample here. You can see that as the footage begins to rewind, it kind of breaks up into just multiple different copies. And so we want to create that effect by using an adjustment layer. So let's create a new adjustment layer. And we're going to start off by using Motion Tile. I'll drag that onto our adjustment layer. Just so we can keep things neat and organized, let's call this Distortion. And I'm going to set a few different, actually just one parameter here on this one. Let's set a keyframe for height at second 0 here. At the beginning of this effect, we want the image to be normal looking, undistorted. So we'll go with that default setting there. And then at 3 frames in, we want to change the height to 27. Okay, and then at 7 frames, we want it to return to being one image in the center. So let's just copy our first keyframe and paste it in. And so you can see that we get kind of that distortion there. Not really distortion so much, but copies of itself, and then back to one full screen image. Alright, next thing we want to do here is distort the image some. So let's choose Turbulent Displace. Drag that onto our adjustment layer. We can close up Motion Tile here. And we're going to set a few different keyframes here. First of all, we don't want the image to start out distorted. We want it to start out looking normal. So let's go ahead and add a keyframe for amount. Let's change that to 0. For size, we'll leave that at 100. Let's set a keyframe for offset, complexity, and evolution. And actually, we've done that here at the end of the comp, which is okay. We we want to do that both at the beginning and the end. So let's set those keyframes, and then let's go to 3, and here's where we're going to change our settings a little bit. Let's do 27 for the amount, 68 for the size. We're going to change the displays from 640 to 800, and we'll make the complexity here 3.5. And now we get a distorted look that has a little bit more of an organic nature to it. Kind of looks like an old VHS distortion. And actually it looks like we didn't set those keyframes. So let's just copy all of our keyframes from frame 0 here at frame 7. And so again, we start out normal, kind of go distorted, and we have multiple copies, and then go back to looking pretty normal again. The other thing that sometimes happens when you fast forward, stop, or pause video like this is that you get sort of a skew one way or the other. And so we're going to apply the slant effect to achieve that look. So let's go back to the first frame here, close these other effects up, and let's set a keyframe again. At the first frame we want it to look normal. Then let's go ahead and move to frame 3. We'll change the slant amount to -25, and that just kind of bends the footage over a little bit. And then back at 7, frame 7, we want to return that to 0. Alright, so that looks pretty realistic already. We want to add some other things to this to kind of take it to the next level. Let's look at our example here again, and we will cycle through the frames here, and you'll notice that we get these 3 horizontal bands of static. Let's go ahead and create those now. So we'll close up our distortion comp here and create a new solid. We'll go ahead and make this solid white. Click OK. And then using the rectangle mask tool here, we're just going to mask this thing off in the center. And everything about VHS was blurry, so let's go ahead and soften this edge up. We'll make it a 10 pixel feather. And then at frame 3, we want this thing to start off at the top. So it's going to kind of start to break up, and then those bands come down. So let's add a keyframe for position, and we're going to move it up to the top so it's out of frame. Just kind of up here on the edge. Alright, and then at frame 5, we want that to come in. So let's kind of take it down to the center here. We're going to set up all 3 bands here in a moment, but we're going to run a few effects and add some expressions, and so we'll go ahead and duplicate that at the end. So let's just get the first one set up here. We're going to have that kind of right there in the center for a few frames. We're going to go to frame 21, and we'll copy the keyframe there from frame 5, so it's just going to kind of sit still here for a moment, and then at frame 24 I'm going to have it return to the top. So we're just going to copy our first keyframe and paste it in. So our band comes down from the top, kind of sits there, and then goes back up. Well, right now it just looks like a white solid, so we want to change that. So let's go ahead and apply fractal noise. What on earth would we do without fractal noise? Alright, so for our settings here, we're going to leave the contrast at 100. We're going to change the brightness to 24. We want to change the scale because right now this doesn't look much like TV noise. We need it to be much smaller. So let's change the scale from 100 to 5. We'll leave the complexity at 6, and then we're going to add an expression here for the evolution so that we don't have to animate the parameters. We'll let an expression do that for us. So I'm just going to alt-click on evolution here, which is going to give us an expression. I'm going to do time times 5,000. We want that noise to move a lot. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's just see here what we've got now. Go to the end here at 24. And here's what we've got so far. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. Now this band kind of sits here in the center, and we want it to kind of bob up and down. So to do that, we're going to use another expression. I got this expression from motionscripts.com, Dan Eber's website. He is an expression guru, knows more than I will ever hope to know about expressions. We're going to add an expression here that's going to make this thing randomly bounce up and down without going side to side. So I'm going to alt-click on the position parameter, and we're going to enter in a wiggle expression that's only going to affect one value here. So W equals wiggle, parenthesis. We're going to have it go 3 times, and we'll allow it to move up 45 pixels. Then semicolon, go to the next line, open bracket value, close bracket, or open bracket 0, close bracket, comma, W, open bracket 1, close bracket, close bracket. And that should give us a nice little bounce. All right, so it is just bouncing up and down a little bit now, randomly. All right, so now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and make our other bands. And again, let's work clean here. So we'll change the name here to static band 1. All right, so we got the first one in place. Let's go ahead and duplicate that. We'll just move it underneath here. Let's take static band 1 and move it. Actually, let's go to the keyframe here. Go to this first keyframe. We're going to move it up to about there. And so these don't look identical in size. Let's just grab the mask and make it a little smaller. All right, we want to grab that keyframe, copy, and paste it in over here so that it basically stays in the same place, although it's going to bob slightly. And then we'll duplicate band 2, so we've got band 3 there. And we'll go back to our first keyframe, or actually our second keyframe, and we're just going to move this down a little bit. So we'll move it down here. Again, we'll just slightly adjust the size of this thing so that they're all just a little different. And so now we have our bands kind of coming down and moving around. Oh, got to make sure that we set our keyframe here so that that bottom band stays basically in the same place. And then 21 frames, it kind of all goes back up and our rewind effect is over. Okay, the other thing that we want to do here is create some horizontal bands of noise. But before we do that, right now the static bands are over top of this black outline. So let's take our outer frame and kind of move it up. That way it covers over our bars. And I just realized that I spelled outer with 2 T's, which is not good. Usually in life I say I'm a graphic artist. I may not spell it right, but it sure is going to look good. All right, so now that our 3 bands are underneath, that looks a little nicer. And we want to create those horizontal bands that are going to help kind of distort our image here sideways. You can see what those are doing in the final footage. So let's create a new solid. And we're going to make it white. Click OK. And to this layer, we're going to add some fractal noise. This is going to create some horizontal bands. So let's go ahead and name that. And let's adjust the parameters here. So we're going to bump the contrast way up to 650. For brightness, we're going to go negative 190. And for transform, we don't want to do uniform scale. We're going to really stretch these things out so they go more of a horizontal banding. Let's go 2300. And on the height, let's go 20. Going to change the complexity to 15. That gives us some nice noise here and there. And then for evolution here, we're going to create another expression. Time times 10. We don't need it to move quite as much as the noise. The TV noise, that is. And there we have that. Now, we want to stretch these out even further and blur them a bit. So let's do a directional blur. And let's make the angle 90. And the blur length, we'll do 150. And that starts to blur that up pretty good. Now, the only problem with this blur is that we kind of start to lose these background or the lighter bands. So let's do a levels adjustment. And we're just going to grab the whites here and take them to about 35 or so. And that'll kind of bump everything up so we really get a lot of bands there. And then we want to add a little bit of noise to this. So let's just drag that in. And we'll use about 15% on the noise. And let's turn color noise off. We want to leave it black and white. And last thing we'll do is blur this up a bit. So we'll use fast blur. I'm going to set that to 5. Alright, so right now obviously we can't see anything. Ultimately what I would like to do is make this layer an overlay, but I don't want it to kind of kill everything in the background. And I could make it screen, of course, and that would give us just the brights, the highlights, but I like the way overlay looks, but I don't want the darks. So what I'm going to do here is apply an effect called Alpha from Max Color. This is kind of like Unmult, although they don't seem to have a 64-bit version of that plugin out yet. But all this does is it makes the black transparent, actually creates an alpha channel from the dark color, the Max Color. If you don't have that plugin, I think I had to install the Pixel Blender plugins to get it. You could always put a white solid under this and set it to Luma, and then set that to overlay, and then when we get into our new comp, we can set that to collapse transformation, which will give us the layer mode from this comp. So I'm going to go ahead and set it to overlay, which I think just gives a bit of a nicer feel to that background, gives us some bright levels, and it's also going to help distort our rewind. Alright, so this composition is basically set up. The only thing we need to do here is just turn off our background footage, and we can move on to our what we're going to call our render comp. So let's call that render comp, and we want to set it to, let's set it to about 12. It's going to be more than we need, but that's okay. And let's drag in our distortion comp and our footage. Again, whatever footage you want to use here. Turn the audio off from the distortion comp. And the way that we're going to drive all the fast forwards and rewinds here, for a moment, let's just turn the distortion comp off, is we are going to remap the time here. So go to Layer Time, Enable Time Remapping, and we're going to set some keyframes here. We're going to let this thing play to about 4:13. Of course, these are all just values I made up for this thing. You could have your rewind effect go longer or shorter, or start it whenever you'd like to. We're going to have that go until 5:09. We're going to set another keyframe here in our time remapping to 0. So from 4:13 to 5:09, we're going to go backwards in time. Then after that, we're going to let this thing play out to 6:26. And what we're going to do is just take 0 here and add this amount of time to it, which is going to equal 1 minute or 1 second and 17 frames. This is when our pause effect will begin, so we're going to pause until 8:09, and we can just copy this keyframe and paste it in. And then so this thing plays out at the correct speed. I'm just going to get rid of this keyframe here. We're at 8:09 right now, so if I add 2 seconds to the timeline, we go up to 10:09. We can just add 10 seconds to, or 2 seconds, I'm sorry, to 1:17. So let's make that 3:17 instead, and then that way, after our footage is paused, it will play out at a normal speed. So we're playing normal, we rewind here, going to play normal again, and then pause, and then play normal again. All right, so the way that we're going to get that nice rewind look is to turn on our distortion comp here over the rewind section, and we want to apply the displacement map filter to, actually we're not going to apply it directly to the footage, we're going to apply it to an adjustment layer. So let's create a new adjustment layer. Let's call this distortion, or actually let's call this displacement, and we'll drag it underneath the distortion comp. I'm just going to move it over here to our little rewind section. I'm going to trim this by holding Alt and the close bracket, and we'll just trim that right up. We'll do the same thing for the distortion comp here. Okay, so we've got the displacement map. Actually, we didn't set it yet. So let's grab the displacement map filter and apply it to our adjustment layer, which obviously is going to distort everything underneath. We need to change the displacement map layer to distortion comp. That's going to use the values, all the lights in the, well, actually we're going to base it on red and green here. We're going to bump this way up. Let's set red to 253, and we're going to set green to 20. Now you could play around with this and do other settings, or try some of these other options, but I thought the red and green looked just fine. And you can see that it really does start to kind of bend our footage up. So that kind of distortion on top of the time remapping really sells that effect as kind of a rewind. Now the other thing that we want to do is we've got these kind of white areas. Let's use our collapse transformation option here, and that sets that back to overlay, which I think looks just a little nicer. All right, so let's go ahead and duplicate these two layers, our distortion comp and displacement layer, and we're going to move those over and set them over our still pause portion. All right, let's just move those over. Going to move them to that keyframe there. All right, so let's just expand the expand those out so that they last the same amount of time as our pause. Now the thing I would like to do on this is avoid having the exact same effect. We're just going to use the very end. Let's move the distortion comp over so that we use just the very end of the horizontal bands here. So those static bands. Okay, so we're going to grab just this little section here so they appear just at the beginning of the pause for just a frame or two. We'll go to the beginning of that and hit Alt forward bracket, and then we'll just grab it and pull it out so that it goes to the end of our pause section. Now the other thing that we need to do is we need to tell this displacement map to use this distortion comp. And so that we can kind of keep everything clean here, let's rename these compositions. So we're going to call this rewind distortion. We're going to call this one pause distortion. All right. So now we've got, actually we haven't set it yet. We want to take this second displacement map and make sure that it is referencing the pause distortion, which it is now. So that's going to make that look a little bit different than the first one. We don't want them to look identical. Okay, the next thing we're going to do to really kind of sell this effect is create some time code. So let's create a new composition. I'm going to call it time code. And we'll go ahead and have it be 12 for the duration, same as our footage comp here. Create a new solid. Doesn't really matter what color it is. And just to keep it clean here, we'll call this time code. And we're going to choose effect, text, and numbers. And there's a great font that you can use that's free. It is called Pixel Splitter. It's available at dafont.com/pixelsplitter.font, and it really looks like the old on-screen display. So we're going to choose that as our font. Might just read the terms of use on that for commercial purposes. We want to make that font white. I'm going to set the type from number to time code, and you could use any of these different time codes. I'm just going to use 30. It's going to go by so fast you won't really even be able to determine what's happening there, if it's 25, 30, or whatever. We want to change the size here to 65. We're going to turn off proportional spacing. We don't want those numbers bouncing all over the place, and that's what happens if you leave proportional spacing on. And after you turn that off, we're going to need to adjust the tracking. So let's bump the tracking up to 27. And then we're going to, I had to guess the first time I did this, but I have the numbers now. So for position, we're going to do 823 and 84. That's going to kind of move it right up into place. And we'll just go ahead and close that. Simple enough. And then we're going to add the time code to our composition. Now, what we want to do is have the time code match our whatever current frame we're seeing as it plays. And so to do that, we're going to enable time remapping. And rather than have to set a bunch of keyframes, we're going to create an expression. Really simple. We're just going to grab the pick whip and drag it down to the time remap. And now, when we move around in time, our time code is actually going to match whatever frame we're on. So that's a really simple way to do that. And let's go ahead and trim this up. So we're going to trim the front. Again, Alt forward bracket. And we want the on-screen display to kind of hang around a little bit. After you would hit play or stop, you'd see that counter on the screen for just a short while. So let's go out to 523 and we'll trim the edge of that, or trim that clip down there. And let's duplicate that time code comp. We'll drag it over here, and we're going to drag it out a ways, and let's cut it off here at 827. Again, after we begin to play, we want that to hang around for just a moment. All right, the next thing that we're going to do then is add our rewind, play, pause indicators here at the top. So let's go ahead and grab our font, and we've got Pixel Splitter set up. Remember, we use 65 for our number on the time code, so we're going to use the same number there. And let's start out with rewind, R-E-W. Just kind of move it here. Leave room for when it says play. Kind of match that up. And again, let's just trim our layer here a bit. And so at the end of our rewind section, we want to chop that off, and then play is going to come up for just a moment for this overlap section here. So let's duplicate rewind, just drag it under here, and change rewind to play. And we're going to drag it over to the end. Again, I guess I haven't said this yet, but just holding shift so that everything kind of aligns correctly. And we'll chop off the end of that play there. Actually, I got it backwards. Let's move over play, not rewind. And chop it off. And so we go from rewind to play. All right, now we can duplicate these layers and drag them over here. And we're going to change, actually, line that up there with our pause effect. Let's change rewind to pause. We're going to have to move that over a little bit. Just using the over arrow. And play stays play. All right. So now we want to kind of take our on-screen display and treat it so that it has that old school look again. So let's select all of those layers, and we want to add a fast blur. So I'm just going to double click, and that's going to apply it to all the layers. And let's just do about 2 on the blur. Again, it just softens it up, makes it look very VHS-like. The other thing that we're going to do is apply a displacement map so that when all this distortion begins to happen, it's going to affect our on-screen display too. It's just not going to affect it quite as much. So let's do displacement map. Just double click again here, and that'll apply it to all of our layers. All right, so now what we have to do is tell each layer which displacement map to use. So I'm going to come back over here to this time code, which is our rewind time code, and I'm going to set that to our rewind distortion. So it's referencing the rewind distortion, and we're just going to use the default values here. Again, we don't want this to kind of distort quite as much as everything else. Let's go ahead and do that for the second time code. So we want to change it from referencing itself to referencing the pause distortion. And then we'll come back over here to rewind. We're going to change rewind to reference the rewind distortion comp, and play to use, actually this play here, to use the rewind distortion. Bump over here to the pause, use pause distortion, and then finally here on play we'll use the pause distortion. Okay, well that pretty much sets up our animation. The last thing we're going to do here is just add a sound effect. We've got a tape rewinding sound effect. We're going to just drag down here to the bottom, and we want to line that up with our rewind effect, and we'll just chop it off here at the end, and that pretty much does it. So I guess we ought to go ahead and save. That's always a good idea. And let's go ahead and set our RAM preview up. Just going to hit in there to set that as our RAM preview area, and I won't make you wait for this. You'll get to see it instantly. Alright, somewhere along the way I shifted my my sound effect here, so let me just shift that back. And here's the RAM preview. Well, there you have it. There's the rewind and still pause VHS effect. This is Jason Moore for AETutsPlus.com reminding you to be kind and rewind.